In the mainstream technology landscape, do we care enough about the elderly or disabled when you think about care?
Yeah, yeah. Great question, Will. The short answer is no, and we're missing a big opportunity because we are not prioritizing those populations. We've done some work at Pivotal Ventures with our partners to size the care economy. It's a $648 billion market. I just like to pause and let that sit with you and with our listeners, because it's huge. It's bigger than the pharmaceutical industry. But a lot of that is things that we don't see, right? And I like to say we're all caregivers at some point in our lives, whether you're a parent, you're caring for people that are meaningful to you in your life, family members, parents, etc. And a lot of that work is unseen, unappreciated, and much of it also falls to women. So it's a huge opportunity that I think is massively overlooked, and particularly as we you mentioned the elderly and the aging population. We can no longer ignore these demographic shifts around the globe, but particularly here in the United States. We're in the midst, it's coming, it's the silver tsunami. It's a phrase that I've heard many times, but there are over 60 million Americans that are age 65 plus. Baby boomers account for over 30% of our nation's wealth. So it's huge spending power, huge part of the population. And they need more innovation, right? Like, they're going to be increasingly more and more elderly folks coming online, as the baby boomer. I'm a millennial. I realize I'm getting to middle age, right? Like, it's just going to grow and increase. And so it's really an economic imperative for us to innovate in this market and create more opportunities to support caregivers and caregiving.
So I would define, the care economy as, and I'm going to ask you to pick anything I didn't include, but I think about childcare, I think about eldercare, I think about health technology. What criteria do you use to determine which sectors, or innovations to invest in?
Yep. All of those are in the frame for us at Pivotal Ventures as we think about the care economy. We really start with our investment thesis and our direct investments in care, looking at tech solutions that reduce burdens of care, lower costs of care, and improve access to care. And that's everything, from, as you said, beginning to life to end of life, childcare, mental health for youth and families, general health tech, women's health, aging, longevity space, dementia care. Again, that full gamut. And it's for us, at least, we look to prioritize solutions that are not just for the 1%, that are going to reach 99% of Americans and really unlock, better, again, care solutions for all of us.
So when you talk about how big the opportunity is today, are there trends that tell you this is going to only grow? Or I should say, what trends? Obviously, it's going to grow, but what trends indicate that?
Yeah. I point back to that stat I shared earlier about some of the demographic shifts and just the graying and the aging of our society. People are also living longer. We're hoping to see that convergence with the lifespan and the health span. So as you live longer, hopefully you're living healthier as well. I think that's one trend. I think a greater focus, amongst consumers about what they are putting into their bodies, right, and the impacts that has on your lifestyle choices, how you're living, how long you're living, all of those are probably two big ones I'd point to. Another one too is just we're living in a more diverse society. One of our partners in our fund portfolio, BBG Ventures, has done some research around what they call the polycultural America. It's more multiracial. 53% of Americans under the age of 18 are non-white, right? And that number is also, only going to continue to grow. And that wealth gap also continues to widen across, race, age, worker type. So these are all themes and trends that I think have a huge impact on how we should be building innovation and building more inclusive systems. and ideas at the table to meet the needs and demands of this, incredibly rich and diverse tapestry of a society that we have here in the United States and around the globe.
Yeah. Your work and, Pivotal Ventures, at large aims to, do a lot of work to advance women's power and influence.
Yeah.
How do you measure that? How do you define success in that regard?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one, I spend a lot of time thinking about because it is a big, lofty goal. We're on a mission, and our principal, Melinda French Gates, has committed, her time and capital to this, advancing women's power and influence around the globe. What we're measuring is really wanting to see women in positions to make decisions, control resources, shape the policies and perspectives in our homes, in our workplaces, and in our communities. So that's across, a variety of dimensions and levers. Specific to the work that I lead in our investment strategy, we're hoping to change the face of the investment industry and venture capital specifically. When we started Pivotal, 9 years ago or so, and even rolling back the clock before that, about 9% of decision makers and check writers at U.S. venture capital firms are women. That number now sits closer to 18%. So, a nice growth, in the last, couple of years. We still have a ways to go, though. So we have metrics and KPIs along those lines as it relates to tech, to investing, to the political sphere, the number of women running for office, holding office, retaining office. Those are all things that we look at to try and drive and see moving the needle in women's participation in the most important places in our society.
Do you get a sense that people who may have special needs, whether they be elderly, actually need special needs, disability, accessibility, that they too often get left out of the conversation of innovation?
I think they do because, again, they're perhaps unseen if you just boil it down to it. And, venture is the engine for innovation. Venture capital is, I like to think of it that way, like that venture investors or who funds innovation in our society, in this country, for the most part, right, in the tech space. Venture capitalists are not a diverse set of folks, and we've again seen movement and again, I'm speaking of diversity in all aspects, right?
Yeah.
Gender, race, socioeconomic background, sexual orientation, disability, all of those things. And I think if the lived experience that you bring to the table really matters, and that has an impact on how you source, how you underwrite, what ideas get to the table and get funded. So as you said, the folks that, may look different, have a different set of challenges and problems, perhaps aren't, we're not building solutions for them because the people that are funding it, don't live it. They don't see it. And I come back to that often, with caregiving, like I said, as we look at some of these companies that we've backed in our portfolio at Pivotal, but just even more broadly out in the ecosystem, as a mom and a caregiver myself, I see wow, Summer Health, which is a company that we invested in 24/7, 365 text pediatric care for families. It's like, I could use that. I remember times when my kids were very small and I'm Googling stuff thinking that they're literally about to die. It turns out it was something very minor, but that's a real solution that leverages AI and other aspects to, and creates less burnout for pediatricians. It's a win-win on both sides. And so the founder of that company is a mom herself, a mom of 3, acutely could appreciate the need and the gap in that market. And so that's the kind of stuff that I think really matters, and that, we need to build, again, just a greater sense of inclusivity into the system, and it'll drive, what I think a ton more innovation and economic growth and opportunity for all of us.
There's these kind of two statements I'm going to make, and it's interesting to me how they correlate to care, because we say it's the nice thing to do, it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. But we've also said that about investing in Black founders. It's the nice thing to do, it's the right thing to do. But we've had difficulty communicating or getting results on that the returns are there, and it's proven that the returns are there for Black founders or diverse founding teams.
Yeah.
So you brought up these huge numbers with the market opportunity, but still have a more difficult time than you should getting people to pay attention to the care economy.
Yeah.
Why is that?
These are tough questions, Will. but good ones. I love it. No, I mean, it really comes back to, I think you have to, like you said, you can make the case with data, that matters. But people have to see, and I think have these opportunities feel and be more tangible and real to them at the end of the day. At the end of the day, too, and I agree with you. I think the hearts and mind arguments for why you should invest in these sectors that we're talking about, healthcare, women's health, mental health, et cetera, or why you should support diverse founders, Black founders. That's great, but that's not going to move the needle, right? Like you have to, I think, really make it apparent and tangible to folks, what they're missing out on. And that proof, I mean, it takes a long time, specifically in venture, but that'll come through in the performance. We investing, a lot of times people rely, I think to a fault, too much on pattern recognition. And that's fine, right? Like, we all do that as humans, right? We all have our biases, but I think stepping back to pause and check some of those and just really interrogate, is this pattern the best pattern, right? Like, or I often will say as well, when people ask about our diligence process at Pivotal, oh, well, you're just investing in women mostly, or these themes like, care economy, it has to be lower return, or you must be lowering the bar. I say, no, I would stack up our portfolio against any other investors. I said, we're not lowering the bar, we're just reframing the bar. And so I think it's shifting those mindsets, disrupting some of those truisms and patterns is what's really needed to drive that change in the ecosystem in a more sustainable way.
Yeah, very good, very good. There's this quote I found from you where you said, we think if we're putting more capital in the hands of women, they're going to unlock solutions to some of the biggest problems that are facing our society today, unquote. So talk about some examples on what that idea or concept is based on.
Yeah. It really comes back to, I think some of what, I said before, and, the pace of sort of gender equity is slow, right? If at the current rate we're going, it'll take generations. I'll be long gone. My daughter might be long gone before we get there. But that doesn't mean that we're not seeing the opportunity as you noted. And I think for us, I can point to a couple of examples, specifically in our portfolio that I think, have helped this ring true. These are funds, many of them that are, again, the funds that we invest in, there's sort of two parts of our investment strategy: fund investments and then direct investing into companies. And these funds are all majority women owned and led, but they're investing across a variety of themes and sectors, right? We have more generalist funds. We have funds that are fintech focused, digital health focused, investing in AI, you name it, it's in our portfolio. And I think, but all of these fund managers have an edge in sort of how they're approaching and thinking about their sourcing, their stewardship, their strategy, how they add value for their portfolio companies. So again, I mentioned BBG Ventures earlier. They're investing in, a broad set of diverse, founders, really leaning into that thesis about the polycultural America. Rethink Impact is a fund that we've invested in now over multiple fund cycles, focusing on female and non-binary founders, but across a variety of different themes and sectors: sustainability, education, healthcare, et cetera. And many of the companies that they backed, again, these founders are building in spaces where there are real meaningful gaps. in the economy. On our direct portfolio, we've backed companies like TIA that are promoting new models of care for women's well-being, and centering women, the kind of whole health experience for women and how they've built their platform and their clinics. Little Otter provides comprehensive, mental health care for children and their families. So, kind of, I think a through line in all of these examples is a willingness to sort of see, the needs of consumers a little bit different. One, two, the archetype of what a successful investor looks like, can be very different. I think we're willing to, step in and take those risks and back people, particularly on the fund manager side, very early, and partner with them and support them as they build and scale what'll be the next generation of leading venture capital firms. I mean, you asked one more thing I'll say, Will, about success.
Yeah.
I think for our strategy, in 10 or 15 years, it's someone looking at the funds that we've invested in at Pivotal and say, wow, Melinda French Gates invested in this firm in a fund one, and these are now the platforms and the firms that are the leading in franchises in venture, and they're going to be more diverse led than they have been historically. The types of folks that are more women on the Midas list, all of those metrics and lists and criteria that we look at. Success for us is that they look and reflect a more diverse set of perspectives.
Love it. And just looking at some of your past work, I've seen that you've observed, that conversations around inclusion in VC have cooled a bit, amidst a lot of external forces and challenges.
Yes.
So what strategies can industry leaders use to, keep that alive, keep it ignited, even in the face of resistance?
Yeah. I mean, our work matters now more than ever. I like to say we've perhaps had a little bit of a wind in our sails and around, in diversity and inclusion over the last few years. That's changing, but we're, at least at Pivotal, going to continue to highlight the inequities that exist, across various industries, tech, finance, government, the political spirit, et cetera, and get the capital to those that are performing, right? Like I always say, I'm not investing in people that are in funds and in companies that we don't underwrite and believe have an opportunity to deliver, great results back to us and to the other investors. And so, I think in the midst of these external challenges, you really have to come back to, like I said, less of the heartstrings and more of the economic case, right? Like so much of the discourse has turned to, anti this, anti that. Well, let's be pro. Who's not pro economic growth? The pie, like me or a Black founder or a woman leader getting an investment does not mean that there's less for someone else. I think this is going to create more opportunity for everyone. And so I come back to like those types of arguments are the ones that I think we need to be making, and more of the asset framing versus the deficit framing, right? Like take it out of the negative and have people see, the real expansiveness of the opportunity when you center, diversity and inclusion in the work that you're doing. There's been a ton of research, McKinsey and others that have put out, that show that more diverse teams, companies, perform better, have better results over time.
Yep.
And we're holding back our GDP. If the gender gap were narrowed, it would be like tens of trillions of dollars. So it would be flowing in the economy, right? And so I just encourage, all of us to lean on those stats and let that, sort of continue to animate our work and just do the work, right? Like find these great companies, these great fund managers, get them the support that they need so that they can build and be excellent. And we're committed to continuing to do that at Pivotal Ventures.
There's this other quote I found where you said, the care economy, the need to create a modern caregiving system that supports families of all types, that's where innovation starts. We need to get more women into these technology roles, into STEM, into education, so that they can be founders of tomorrow and the leaders in these tech businesses. So my question is two part. I hate to ask 2-part questions, but this is
that's okay.
I know you can handle it. So you've described this. You said the care economy is foundational to innovation and societal progress. So that's one question. How is it foundational to innovation and societal progress? And then 2, what systemic changes do you believe are necessary to most urgently modernize, our caregiving ecosystem and the opportunities for women?
Yeah. I'd say to the first part of the question, we need to make life easier for caregivers in our country. So to do that, we need a more diverse set of entrepreneurs and investors, like building sustainable business models that deliver these solutions. A stat I saw recently, we look at, well, I have many stats, but we look at a lot of the barriers that hold women back from reaching leadership positions, starting businesses, leadership positions in their companies. In caregiving is one of the biggest ones, right? So women spend an average of about 22 hours per week on unpaid care work. Men spend about 14. So that delta is huge, right? And I think part of what we're trying to solve for is, again, getting more of this innovation and ideas to unlock that potential so that women and men too, right, can spend more time. I mean, that unpaid care work is so important and so foundational, but there are ways that we can make that less burdensome in some ways so that women and men too, right, can go out and fully participate in our, in the economic sphere, right? So that's why it's foundational. The second part of your question, Will, around like, what is it going to take to, kind of
systemically,
to like drive this change. Part of it, and this is what I really think is powerful about our approach at Pivotal, is we apply multiple levers to advance social progress and women's power. Investing is one and a key one, but we also leverage philanthropy. We also leverage policy and advocacy work. And innovation, investing is essential to create a more modern caregiving system. We also need good policy around that too. And so I view that as like a key unlock. You can have all the best ideas and fund them, but if the government is not stepping in to 100%. Support that at the state, local, federal levels, at all levels. One example of this is some work we've done at Pivotal over the years to advance paid leave. The United States is the only advanced economy in the world that does not have paid leave for caregivers. And we got very close. We've gotten very close multiple times, but I view policies like that, the government has to step in at a certain point and make this a priority, these issues a priority, to allow that innovation and then philanthropy too, addressing some of the market failures that exist. So all three, and that's I think what's incredibly powerful about how we show up at Pivotal is that we're tackling these big intractable, like systemic problems with all the tools in our toolbox.
Yeah. And while technology has the potential to address some of these gaps, you've recognized that it's not a standalone solution, you know? So I think about AI. And so how do you how you envision AI working alongside policy changes or, entrepreneurs? How does AI accelerate that progress?
Yeah. AI is foundational. It's table stakes now. I often joke and I'll say, if I go into a meeting or an event and I don't talk about it, AI, as I mentioned, I'm sort of like, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah.
But we need to ensure that we're building it and leveraging it, using it responsibly, and not perpetuating the same biases and issues that exist currently, right? Like, to me, that would be a terrible outcome, is if we're sitting here having this conversation in 2, 5, 10, 20 years, and we've taken AI and put it in a place, that's creating more harm than good. So that's where policy matters, I think, again, and look, I'm not saying you don't want to overregulate, you want to make sure that there's space for innovation. But you have to strike that balance, I think, with AI to get to the spot where we need to be to make sure that we're not, again, just running back the same old playbook. But I get really excited about what AI can do, specifically in the caregiving and kind of healthcare space, just to advance research, patient care. We see AI and the care economy intersecting a ton. As you're looking at that, again, kind of infrastructure that's needed to modernize and automate the caregiving and kind of healthcare system, AI can be a huge part of that. So I mentioned Summer Health earlier, one of our portfolio companies. They've been redesigning kind of their care operating system to integrate, AI more into that platform, to improve kind of efficiency, patient interface, AI use cases, so sort of, different ways that they can build AI into the product. And they're doing that sort of from day one. So it's hugely exciting, right? And it'll make it probably a better user experience, more efficient. And we're seeing, that's just one example, but I think, one of many in our portfolio, and just, more generally, we're seeing across the tech landscape.
Yeah, you mentioned, AI at this point is table stakes, and for people like that means it's got to be there. It's obvious. Like that's just you're just doing the bare minimum almost.
Yes.
And so for that, because it's so quickly table stakes, because most of us last 18 months are just getting aware of user-facing AI, ChatGPT.
I'm like, now ChatGPT, I do, I'm like, I put everything into ChatGPT.
Exactly,
right?
100%.
I did it a year ago. I was like, what is ChatGPT?
100%. And so I still talk to people every day who are not using it, which is baffling to me. I can save anybody 4 hours out of their day just by using this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think about, because so many people are still so far behind. I mean, you and I, we may live in a bubble in some respects. Like we talk about this stuff all the time.
Yes.
But how do you talked about policy, and I want you to go deeper on this, is how do we make sure that as we integrate AI and other technologies into caregiving, how do we not introduce new inequalities?
Yeah, no, I mean, you didn't ask what keeps me up at night, but that's sort of embedded in your question, right? Yeah. It's things of that nature, right? How we're taking and using tech and innovation that leaves people and populations, individuals, communities behind. That's unacceptable. We do not want that as an outcome. And so I think to address it, a lot of it, and again, in the work that we do at Pivotal, it's that education, it's figuring out how to get these tools to more people in a way that they can build trust and build knowledge around how to use it. Because like you said, AI should just not be for those of us that are, the tech elite that sit in, New York and San Francisco, DC, or whatever, your big city, and kind of are already inclined to use this stuff. And so again, I think it has to go back to how we're setting this up, even for kids, right? Like my kids are, the stuff is like showing up in elementary school, and
Absolutely.
like how they're using it. And so, I think for them, and making sure that those systems are, sort of fairly being set up, that they have an opportunity to learn and ask questions early, but that there's opportunities in a community-based way for others to start to gain more facility and understanding of how these things work. Because another bad outcome is you build kind of like the tools I was describing with some of our portfolio companies that leveraging AI, and then you have users, again, it becomes not a 99% solution, it's a 1% solution, right? If we're not bringing everyone along. So we need to make sure that education is there, that opportunity is there, to really leverage it from the beginning.
Yeah. You talked earlier, which it struck me because I'm very interested in this. You said, care also includes things you put in your body, so we're having a growing conversation about the foods we eat, et cetera, all these things. And, what are some other overlooked, or you can double down on that. What are some overlooked opportunities within the care space that you believe could also drive significant societal and economic impact, for that matter?
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily, well,
maybe overlooked is the wrong word, but
yeah, I don't know if I'd say overlooked, but I think maybe under or appreciated, or complex, perhaps is another way to describe it. Childcare is tough. And I think it's tough for tech and venture sort of scalability. I haven't lost faith, or I'm still searching, hoping to find solutions to sort of crack that nut, so to speak. Because if anything, that those early years, right, are again also foundational. Women stepping out of the workforce to care for their kids or family members, again, very important work. But there has to be, we have to find a way, and this is again where policy could come in too, to tap in on and unlock that. So I think childcare is tricky, but I still view it as complex, but I still view it as an opportunity. I think these acute kind of caregiving moments or spaces also represent a big, or complex, but represent an opportunity. Maternal health, kind of that both pre and postpartum phase. We have in this country some of the worst maternal health outcomes, particularly for Black women, right? And so there's a huge gap in care there that I think we need to figure out how to solve. In that women's health and kind of care space too, menopause, right? Like I've been astounded as I've read and spent more time with some companies building in this space, just how underfunded, how under researched, doctors just brush past like women who are really, struggling, right? As they move through that phase of life. And it has impacts. You're able to maybe work or travel or take on as much responsibility when you're going through that. And so that, as I mentioned, dementia care, kind of end of life, another kind of acute moment, mental health as well. So those would be a couple that I'd call out that, again, not necessarily overlooked, but I think complex and represent a huge opportunity for more innovation.
And finally, one more quote from you, because there was a lot of them. I'm like, these are really good.
Good.
Thought starters. There's one you said, instead of a demoralizing story about stalled progress, we can and should tell a story about the women of color across the industry who have pushed ahead. And so my question there is about framing and how important is framing when we have issues, but the storytelling and how you tell the story matters, but the numbers are still the numbers. How important is the framing of that story?
The framing is the key. That's it. You said it, Will. And that quote you referenced in that piece, part of what, in partnering with some of our fund managers that were highlighted in there, including Miriam Rivera at Ulu Ventures, Promise Felon at Grove Warrior Capital, they are just excellent investors, operators. Miriam was early at Google. She's been in the game for a very long time, has built a tremendous track record. And yes, she's Afro-Latina, but she's just a badass investor, right? And part of it is less of, we're helping them. No, let's just talk about why they win and how they're good. And that's where the storytelling and the framing matters. And it's about the asset, not the deficit. That's what I come back to. And I'm kind of over let's just write a story about women of color being women of, because they're women of color. It's like, no, you should have a woman of color on every story and every list because they're excellent and they're great investors or they're great founders, and they're doing something innovative and different. And the other thing I point to is, like, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Right. So that representation, getting those examples out there is so important. And it matters about who stories we tell. And so it's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. Our team works really hard to make sure that our partners, these fund managers and founders, are being seen not just because they're women, but because they're great investors who are women too.
I love it.